Kate Deering, welcome to the Hair Like Hers podcast. It's so amazing to have you. I don't think people realize what an incredible guest we have today.
Well, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here today.
We are going to talk all things health and wellness, and we are coming at you from a very unique and really interesting perspective that is going to be new to a lot of you guys. And that's what we do here. We focus on things that you don't necessarily have the chance to hear elsewhere. So let's get into your story, who you are, and how you came to your approach to health and wellness.
Well, I have been in the health and fitness nutrition world for close to 30 years now, so I have quite the history. I have done everything from training to teaching boot camp classes to running health clubs. But the last 12 years have primarily been spent on doing nutritional coaching. And I got into that primarily because when I was starting to hit my late 30s, like many women, things started to change on me. And at the time, I thought I was doing everything correct, eating a very clean diet, exercising every day, very consistently. And things were not working out. They were definitely going downhill for me. And this is when I was actually doing some coaching classes with the Paul Chek Institute on nutrition. And I learned about a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ray Peat. And he is a biologist, and he essentially talks everything metabolism. And I certainly always thought I understood metabolism, it's calories we're burning and so forth. But what I realized, I didn't have any concept of it at all. And what I realized about myself was everything that I was currently doing, which was pretty restrictive dieting and probably over exercising, was actually acting negatively to my metabolism, which essentially started creating a downhill spiral for me in my late 30s. So from there, I completely changed my philosophy on how I treated myself and how I treat my clients. And now it comes from a perspective of healing your baseline metabolism, supporting your health from the inside out, nutritionally and energetically, and understanding how you can use your own biomarkers to assess yourself and how well you're doing. Because I think a lot of women, certainly when they come into their late 30s and 40s, as they hit perimenopause and things start shifting, they're trying to work overly hard to still stay fit and lean or whatever they're trying to accomplish. And when we start to realize that maybe a lot of what we're doing is working against us, then, this whole system that I work on now is about kind of retraining them on how to look at their body differently and how to assess their health differently so that they can make healthier and better choices for the rest of their life.
Retraining is such a major word. I feel like we have so much of that to do across like any kind of, health related industry. It's like we've learned to look at things in one way, and we grew up like that. We've been influenced like that our whole lives. And now with all these new discoveries, it's just a constant battle, a constant uphill battle to change, what we're used to and apply these new approaches to our health. But if that's what it takes, like we got to retrain ourselves. We have to stop and break the cycle.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the health industry for many years. And for me personally, being in it for 20 plus years and then trying to unlearn everything I had learned, thinking that was the correct way. Because, essentially it had sort of worked for a good period of time. And I think that's where people have trouble when they shift their beliefs around what health and nutrition really should look like. And so there is some unlearning, certainly with how I teach it, because it will challenge a lot of people's beliefs around health and nutrition. And so it's definitely a 180 from what most health and professionals teach. And it's just based on supporting your metabolism on a cellular level and how that works and what things that we need to provide our systems with so it can actually produce ample amounts of energies for your own health, not just to go run on 10 miles. We have to start looking at things a little bit differently. And I think when people do, and certainly when they start this approach, they have a lot of light bulbs go off and they're like, oh, that's why this is happening to me. And that's why this is happening. Because nothing is ever explained to them, certainly in the mainstream health world or your medical doctors. Like none of what we talk about in the world of metabolism is actually explained. And so when you get into this approach, you will start thinking differently, but a lot of it will start making sense to you.
Great. Let's do it. Let's challenge the, conventional way of thinking.
Right.
Okay. Next question is, what is metabolism and why should we focus on it?
Yeah, so that's always the go-to question. And the answer to that is your metabolism is the sum of every metabolic or chemical process in your body. And when it's running well, everything's working well in your body. And what that means is like your digestion's working well, your hormonal system is working well, right? You have a pain-free period, you're fertile, you actually want to have sex, you're thinking clearly. You don't have to work out countless amounts of hours to stay fit and lean, where you can actually do that without having to work out 6-7 hours a week or whatever. But essentially, the systems of your body are functioning optimally. And I think what's happened in today's world, we've kind of forgotten about how our system should work when it's healthy. We kind of look at the outer exterior and go, that person's lean or fit, maybe they look good, they must be healthy. And quite honestly, that's not necessarily true. Certainly because I work with a lot of fitness professionals or people that have been in the industry, myself included. And when I started kind of assessing myself, I was like, I'm fairly lean and I'm super fit, but, I'm having horrible periods. I'm having constipation. My hair's getting dry. I'm not sleeping that great. Energy is kind of sporadic. I feel kind of anxious. All of these things started to show up. And I just thought it was the result of, hey, I'm going to start hitting 40 soon. Maybe this is what perimenopause looks like.
Yeah, it's like accept these changes that are coming.
Yeah. And that's kind of what we're taught, right? Oh, you're going through this. Here's the pill. Here's some hormones. Here's a medication. This is normal for you.
Yeah,
and I'm here to tell you.
Like nobody explains it to you. You just accept it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's not the philosophy. The medical institutions don't teach you that you can improve these things naturally if you support your system. They're just taught to give you a pill or a medication to remove the symptom. And, and I guess if you that is one approach. Usually I find if you go down that approach, usually you get medication after medication after medication because it's never fixing the underlying issue. And for most people, it's their metabolism is starting to not function optimally. And it doesn't necessarily, and so I want to clarify one thing here. When I say metabolism, there are people that are burning a lot of calories, via stress or excessive exercise or whatever. And so they seem to believe that they actually have a high metabolism. But in a sense, what they have is a stressed metabolism, right? They're burning lots of calories via external measures, stressing the crap out of their system. So if you are like burning a lot of calories, but you're also can't sleep, you're anxious, you have poor digestion, right? You can't have a baby or your periods are painful. You do not have a healthy metabolism. You are just burning excessive calories via external measures. And maybe that's keeping you thin, but it's certainly not keeping you healthy. And so when I'm referencing a healthy metabolism, you don't have to burn externally tons of calories. Your internal measures, your body's internal burning to give energy to the systems are working optimally. And so every system is working well because it's getting enough fuel and nutrients to do its job. But when we start taxing our system a lot and start pulling energy externally, the internal systems start dysregulating and the energy going to them starts to decrease because you're stressed or whatever. All these external measures are taking it from you. So there's always this balance. Your body's always trying to stay in balance. And it will do that by shutting some internal systems down to kind of support all this external stuff you may have going on.
Yeah, right. Including your hair, but we'll get into that.
Exactly.
Okay. So people will say like, I have a fast metabolism, and we always attribute that to just like fast digestion or like someone that doesn't keep weight on, right? Like, what about all these like different associations?
Well, I mean, in some levels, they might have a fast metabolism, right? We would look at a child, right? They would have a fast metabolism. So the child's metabolism is usually you can eat lots of food, right? You can use lots of energy. They don't ever gain weight. They're constantly energized, right? But what are children also doing? They're also sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night, right? They're rejuvenating. They have a young system. And so we would balance that, right? Usually people think I have a high metabolism because I eat a lot of food and I don't gain any weight, right? And again, you can do that two ways. You can be eating a lot of food and your body runs well. And I usually see that in the youth, right? They can eat plenty of food and their body stays at a normal weight and they don't gain weight, right? Or you can see it later where you see people that are can maybe eat a lot of weight, but they're also doing a lot of external stressors, right? They're exercising all the time. And it doesn't mean you cannot do that as long as the other things are still happening, all the healthy things, right? Like digestion, a pain-free period, right? You still want to have sex, your detoxification processes are working properly. If that's all working and you want to do this external stuff, cool. If it's not, then you have to kind of look at your health and go, things aren't working optimally for me. What does that mean and why is that happening?
Okay, cool. So that goes into the next question of measuring your own health via biomarkers, which I think is just so interesting because you've told me that we should have the ability to basically assess ourselves.
Yeah, this is why this approach is actually really helpful to people that can, you don't have to get labs necessarily. You can actually use some specific tests at home to see where you are at. One of those is actually taking your body temperature. So a normal body temperature midday should be around 98.6 or 97 degrees Celsius. You should be waking at about 97.8. And if those are lower, and what you're going to find, especially if you're an athlete or someone who does a lot of cardiovascular exercise, usually that number is going to be much lower. Your body has definitely adapted to maybe some efficiency, right? When we do a lot of cardiovascular activity, we adapt. Our body's now becoming more efficient. So what happens is during the rest of the day that we're not exercising, our body temperature, our metabolic rate drops. And it shows up as a 96, a 97. I see 95 degrees in a lot of women who've been doing a lot of activity. And so your body is adapting to the stressors you've put upon it. If you work out a lot, that's a stressor. So it's going to adapt. One of the things it adapts is it downregulates your metabolism the rest of the time. The other biomarker is just to take your pulse, right? Our pulse is also a sign of how well our metabolism is working. A healthy metabolism, a pulse is around 75 to 90 beats per minute, right? If you are an athlete, you are going to have a low pulse, 40 to 50 beats per minute, right? And you're like, well, my doctor told me that was good. Yes, you are very fit if you have a very low pulse. It doesn't mean that you have an optimal metabolism, right? Fitness is not the same thing as health. You can be fit and not be healthy. They're not equated. And I definitely find, especially with my women athletes, they are very fit, but they're cold and they have a very low pulse. So that's great for their sport, right? If I have to go run really fast for 10, 20, 30 miles, I want to be more efficient, right? I don't want to feel like I need to eat tons of food every 20 minutes to keep myself going. So your body's adapted to that. It works for their sport, not for overall health. Those same women are probably going to have no period, right? They start to get bone breakdown. They start to have hair fall out. They start to have some serious biological markers that drop as they continue doing this kind of activity, right? We've all heard about it with the women, like when their periods drop and so forth, right? With these kind of triathlete athletes. Mm-hmm. So those are your two main that you can take, obviously at home. They're very easy. Then the other things are just kind of monitoring symptoms, right? If you are healthy, you should be having a bowel movement every day, not every third day. I mean, I've talked to women that have it once a week. Not good, right? You've got to detoxify that's how your body gets everything out, right? It's part of the detoxification system. You should have a pain-free period, right? Your period should not be painful. It shouldn't put you out for 3 or 4 days. Right. You should actually want to have sex. You should have good fertility, right? So that's all we know in today's society, right? Infertility is $1 billion market. Women can't get pregnant anymore. Why? Why is that happening? Right. Is it just because, or what's going on in our system? What's going on in our lives? So, you should have optimal detoxification. You should be able to people thinking. You should be able to have decent energy all day long. You should be in a decent mood. You should feel frazzled, right? You should be able to have deep sleep. And if any of those markers are off, then we have to look at the whole system. And it's not just a matter of take this pill, right? Take this supplement. It's, hey, what's going on in your life? And are you consuming enough fuel and energy to meet those demands? Because if you have a very stressful life and you're under eating, then that balance is off, right? You're putting the gas on your life, right? You're accelerating because you're pushing yourself really hard, but you're not putting any fuel in. And that becomes a problem. And people are like, well, I have enough body fat on me. I'll just use that. I go, that's a possibility, but I hate to tell you this. Using fat as energy all day long as a primary source is not ideal for a high running metabolism. It can happen. Your body's really cool that it can utilize these alternate resources, but it's not ideal for a thriving high metabolic rate.
Right, because that's not like a complete way of fueling yourself, right? Is that
well, and then ultimately, biologically speaking, your cells, every cell in your body prefers to utilize glucose as energy. And what does that mean? That means carbs. That means sugars. That means, oh my gosh, all those things you've been told to stay away from, right? So, yeah. Right. And they're like, well, that makes me fat, or whatever that the thought around that is. I go, look, that is your body's preferred source of fuel. And when it's running optimally and you're using it properly, for whatever your health is at, your body will feel better. It doesn't mean it's going to drop weight like this, right? And certainly when people think when you improve metabolism, their thought is, well, I'll just lose weight then. That's not necessarily how it works, right? First, you have to improve internal functions of the system, your digestion, hair, all these things that are working on internally before the body will feel what we say safe enough to lose actually that weight. Because you've been stressing it so long, it has to shift back to the adaptive process of utilizing that fuel source.
So really quickly, and we'll get into the carbs and dieting thing next, but before we do, would you say that if it's not guaranteed that you'll lose weight just by a much kind of high running metabolism, that it doesn't equate to weight loss, that you have to work on the other functions first? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what does it take to actually lose weight? Like, and how does that actually happen in the body? What is really required?
Yeah.
Because you will see people, you'll talk to people, I do all the time, that are like, I'm eating less, my body's not changing, I'm working out more, and like nothing is shifting, I'm not losing any weight. I don't personally understand that. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. And it's a great question, right? Because we are certainly taught in today's world that if you want to lose weight, just eat less and work out more, right? It should be calories in, calories out. And that should result in you losing weight, right? And that works to some degree, right? And certainly in your youth, that will work. The problem is that every time you eat less, your body is always adapting to whatever you do to it, right? So whatever stress you place upon it, right? And eating or restrictive eating low calorie or low carb is an actual stress on your body. So your body adapts, and how it adapts is it lowers the metabolism down, right? So it actually starts burning less energy now, even though you're eating less, it starts to shift, right? Now, I'm sure anyone that's listening to this will go, I think maybe that's happening. And what happens is that as you age and as you continue to do that, right? How many times have people done a diet and an exercise program, stopped and started and stopped and started, right? So by that 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th time you've done it, now you're in your 30s or 40s, the body has adapted constantly. So now your body's trying to lose weight, but the metabolism has dropped down to such a degree that it has to continue to eat less and less and less and less. Right. And you try to work. So your body is, again, adapting to all those stressors. And then you're adding exercise on it, another stress, right? You're trying to exert external stress onto it, which even suppresses it even lower, to a point where you're burning a lot less calories. And that's why that no matter what you're doing at this point, nothing is moving. Right. And then, of course, because every time you restrict calories, particularly carbohydrates, when the body actually goes through a stressful situation, like, let's say you have a breakup or a stressful job or whatever, the body is screaming at you going, I need energy. Give me energy. I need some. You're not giving me any, right? And so what you do is usually you go out and you eat an entire chocolate cake, or, right, you go into this binging cycle. And so and at that point in time, you've been so deprived, there's the shut off to tell you you've had enough isn't happening, right? The body's saying, I finally am getting some sugar, whatever it is. I'm going to overconsume it because you've been keeping me from it for so long. And so you see that in a lot of cycles, right? People undereat, then binge, undereat, binge. And of course, that's not everybody, but it certainly sets up that cycle.
Yeah.
And so
what it wants, and the body will crave exactly what it needs.
Yeah, your body tells you things that it wants for reasons. It's not because it's trying to punish you. If it's saying it wants something sweet, it's because that is your body's preferred source of fuel. That's what it wants to run on. And so when you start depriving it, yes, it can push your body into fat loss, right? It can put you into a place of lipolysis where your body's utilizing fat as fuel. But always remember, that's a secondary resource and it comes at a price. As soon as you push your body into burning fat as fuel as a primary source, metabolism drops, right? So always the $1 million question is, well, then how do I finally burn fat, right? So the optimal way is to actually improve the internal functions, right? Getting your body to run optimally, having it supported so that you actually have good digestion, you actually have better sleep. And so the problem is when you actually get your body out of the stress cycles and it's being supported, your body actually will prefer to utilize fat as fuel while you're sleeping or during rest periods. So when it feels
makes so much sense. Hang on, you just like light bulb just clicked for me. So when everything's actually functioning optimally, that means everything's working around the clock as they should, right? Nothing's shutting down or slowing down. Then when you're sleeping, that fat storage will actually start to get used up because your body needs that for fuel because now it's functioning optimally.
Yeah. And when you're resting,
did I get that right?
Well, and when you're resting, what happens is under rest, it's a lot safer for your body to use fat as fuel, right? When you're busy, you're thinking and you're doing and you're working out, you want your quick energy sources, right? Which is normally coming from carbohydrates. So that's going to be the best source. You'll use a good bit of those if you're running optimally. And so that when the body is in a deep state of sleep, right? So if you're not sleeping well, that will certainly inhibit you from losing body fat, right? Least helpfully. So you have to work on your biomarkers, improving temperature, improving pulse, making sure you're sleeping, making sure you have good digestion. If those are all starting to function, then, we can work on tweaking, whether it's your exercise, whether it's trying to build more muscle, whether it's just getting deeper sleep to try to trigger the system to actually start losing body fat. It is never the first thing that happens because we have to work on the health of the system first. So it is a little bit of patience and a little bit of mental shifts because we've been so programmed to say, hey, this program's not successful unless I start dropping body fat. And that's part of the trick to your head, right? You're so used to that. And so if you start this approach and that's not happening, you'll start getting in your own way and go, well, yes, I feel better, but I don't like that I am still carrying 10, 15 pounds. Okay. It's just going to take some time.
That makes perfect sense. It's like, let's get to all the other more important things that are actually going to regulate that function, the weight loss that you're looking for. But we focus solely on losing weight at any cost, right? So this is really interesting. You're getting me in the mindset, Kate. You're getting me into it. I like it.
Yeah, it's a shift. You have to take your focus on that thing, right, and put it over here. And if you keep the focus over here on your health and those biomarkers, the route to get to a better health is a lot easier. And so one of the challenges, certainly when I work with people, is getting their head in the right space. Because if you are only focused on, look, I just want to lose my 10 pounds in a month for a wedding, I'm like, okay, well, then this isn't the right time to do this approach because you're going to just want to stress that. Because if your body's not healthy enough to lose weight, you can still do it, but you're going to have to stress the crap out of yourself. Right. And so if we're trying to improve the system so it works better, we can't just do it like that, especially if you've been doing dieting for decades.
Yeah.
Right. So your body didn't get where it is in a week. It's been taking time. And so, and if I have work with a woman and she's like, I want to lose 10 pounds. And then I'm like, okay, well, what else is going on? And then she gives me a list of 30 things that are going on with her health. I'm like, okay, this is our focus.
Right. This is actually the focus, not that. That is like the end goal, but this is the one that we need to focus on to get there.
That's right. Yeah.
What does somebody do if their temp is off? Like, what do they do if they check these biomarkers, their temperature and their pulse?
Then that's going to be a signal to them, right? That my body's not running optimally. So certainly when I work with people, I have them I have them food log, so we can actually see what they're eating, how much they're eating. how many carbs they're eating, how much protein, and so forth. Where's their energy sources coming from, right? Now, everybody's going to be different. How much energy and fuel you need may be totally different from somebody else that has a different life, has different stressors, is also in a different place of health. So for me personally, when I work with them, I kind of see where they're at, right? And so, I mean, I've worked with all types of people, and some might come in eating 1,000 calories and nothing's happening. So usually what we do, and they could be at 95 degrees. And so what I would suggest is we're going to slowly start increasing your calories. Slow and steady, not all of a sudden, right? If you do it too fast, you are going to get a lot of rebound effects, right? You will gain weight really fast. You might not feel well. Your body doesn't like extreme changes. It likes slow and consistent if you want it to adapt properly. That's what is so cool about your body. It is very adaptive in good things and bad things, right? The point of your systems, your body in itself, is its number one job is to keep you alive. It is not to get you lean. It's not that you should have magnificent hair. Like, those are not top priorities. We want those things, but those are very low on the totem pole of your health. But if you improve all those other biomarkers, those things can also appear.
Right. They're just like the happy side effects.
Exactly.
Okay. So you are a certified nutritional consultant also. Let's talk about carbs and diet. Let's get into what it really means to fuel your body and what it really takes, and, help us understand carbs better.
Right. So carbs are a variety of different things. They can be anything from your starchy carbs like breads and potatoes and rice to your very simple carbs like fruits and fruit vegetables and vegetables. So there's a variety. And then, of course, you have the carbs that, everyone thinks is like cakes and cookies and processed garbage and so forth like that. So what I'm usually referencing and what I always use to support what I would like to do is first and foremost is to eat nutrient filled carbohydrates that are easy for the body to digest. And I say easy to digest because usually in a compromised system, you are going to have a lot of trouble digesting things like bread and even starchy, maybe rice or potatoes. And then you may even have a really hard time digesting things like raw lettuce, raw vegetables. A lot of those are really hard for the human body to break down. And when you're compromised, we have to give you fuel that's really easy for your body to assimilate and use. So usually that means a lot of fruits, a lot of tropical fruits, even cooked fruits, right? We want to pre-break down some of these foods so that it's easy for your system. It could be utilizing juices, right? Everyone's like, oh my God, juice has too much sugar, right? Context always has to be given when you're talking about carbohydrates and how you're using them. So I'm not telling anyone they should go out and just consume copious amounts of fruit. That's not how this works. There is a process and a way to do it so that your body can, again, adapt in a way that's going to benefit it, right? So if you have been carb-free or keto or carnivore or any one of these diets that's really restrictive of carbohydrates, you have to move very slow through this process so you don't get a lot of negative rebound, right? So if you move very quick, you're going to have more negative things happen to you because your body hasn't been utilizing carbohydrates well. Again, it will adapt. You can fat adapt. You can get your body adapted to utilizing fat as fuel. Is that ideal for metabolism? No, it's not. Not from the context of where I'm coming from. Is it more ideal for somebody that wants to lose body fat quickly? It can be, and it can work until it doesn't. Right. So a lot of diets we do give us a benefit, or they feel good even for years. Right. And that could be anywhere from a vegan approach to vegetarian to carnivore. I mean, a lot of people do really well and feel good. And I'm not saying if you are, by all means, continue to do what you are. If you are at a place where, hey, this isn't working as well, or I'm starting to see some of these biomarkers aren't they don't look ideal, then maybe you should kind of contemplate, what carbohydrates are. In a human body, it is your preferred source of fuel. We assimilate it. Our energetic cellular systems produce lots of energy when we utilize glucose as fuel. And the other component that we look at when we look at carbohydrate metabolism is we produce carbon dioxide, which in the medical world is considered a waste. but it's not necessarily a waste. It's actually produced in our cells, and it's utilized to help facilitate oxygen to get into our cell. They call it the Bohr effect. And that's important because you need oxygen for metabolism, right? For optimal metabolism, you do need oxygen. And if it cannot get into there because you're not producing enough carbon dioxide, then you're going to have a slower metabolism, right? It's not going to function. And that's an important component that a lot of other dietary approaches don't ever talk about, is the actual importance of carbon dioxide. And you don't hear it. It's not very mainstream, but it's a very important component when you actually talk about ideal cellular carbohydrate metabolism.
I mean, that makes complete sense. See, this is how I like to learn things. And this is why I love to do things like this, because you actually broke it down. Like, we don't have enough of that. We haven't been explained anything enough to understand it and stick to it. Something doesn't work, we just jump to the next thing, like you said. But this makes incredible sense. Carbs are the preferred source of fuel for the body because it does produce the carbon dioxide that's required for the actual oxygen to allow these different functions of the body to do their thing, right?
Yeah, well, carbon dioxide is produced through cellular metabolism, but then one of its jobs is to pull oxygen out of your blood and pull it into the tissue, right? I mean, that's where the oxygen is important, right? It's not that important in the blood. The blood's just transferring. That's your transportation system. That's the highway system. It needs to get into the tissue, right, to really produce its fall. And that's why we refer to that as cellular respiration, right? Like breathing at the cells. Like breathing just doesn't happen in the lungs. It's happening down in every one of your cells. And we want them to breathe optimally. And the way we do that is through glucose metabolism, right? And of course, glucose metabolism requires many nutrients, many vitamins, many minerals for it to produce enough energy. And if any one of those are lacking, then you can have a little break in the system. So those are also important. And that's why it's always nutrient-rich carbohydrates are preferred, because we want to supply your body with lots of nutrition, right? And that's where the nutrition part of it is so important. But we want that nutrition to be bioavailable, so easy for our system to utilize, right? And we don't want your system, again, if it's compromised, to have to work really hard. So like if I gave my body a piece of raw spinach that has no calories, right? We all think that's really good. Well, it's no calories and has all this nutrition. However, if your system is compromised, it can't break that food. It's very hard for the system to break down a piece of spinach and get and pull what it needs out of it. So what happens a lot of time is people can't break it down. They're not getting the nutrition. It goes through the system. It's hard for the system to digest. And then it starts creating a lot of GI issues. And so, when I tell people, hey, you might have to remove all these raw salads, green salads from your diet, they want to look at me like I'm a crazy person. But I will assure you, when they do it, they feel a ton better.
It's kind of like figuring out the right order to address everything in, right? Because like I've had a gut specialist on the show, and we were talking about why it's necessary to eat these types of bitter foods and raw foods. And I feel like that has its place and time also. But if, you're helping somebody incorporate these nutrient-rich carbs into their diet, is that someone who's coming from a restrictive diet? Like, what if they ate the starchy carbs and the nutrient-dense carbs? Like, what if it's somebody that has been kind of eating everything? Then what are you doing? Right.
Well, then my question is, well, what's going on with you? Right. I mean, it doesn't really come down to what they're eating per se, as what's happening to them. Why are they coming to me? Do they have GI issues? Right? Or they have energy issues? Are they going through perimenopause? Is their period like horrible? I mean, what's the general issue? And so I always look at it as an energetic level, right? Your body requires energy to do everything, right? Nothing's happening just by poof, right? It doesn't work on air. Right. It requires fuel. Every system knows. Your digestive system, to think, your brain is a huge sugar consumer, right? It's a small part of your weight, but can consume to 25 to 50% of your carbohydrate stores. Right. Yeah. So if you're thinking a lot during the day, you are burning a lot of calories sugar wise through your head. Yeah. Right. through thinking. So we have to remember all of our systems are taking energy and to do their function. Your liver has 500 functions. It requires a lot of fuel to work. So what happens is nothing will just dead stop. It's not going to say, well, nothing. We're not going to give you any sort of digestion. We're just going to lower the system's function, right? So maybe motility won't work as well. But when motility doesn't work as well, you could get things like SIBO or leaky gut or all of these other issues that might come with that, right? You can throw a bunch of foods in there with fiber or eat raws or whatever. But if the actual system isn't getting the energy to do what it needs to do, that's not going to work very well, right? You're asking the body to break it down.
Yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. Can you just tell me a couple examples of your like favorite nutrient dense carbs?
So fruits are huge, right? And I like to use more like tropical fruits. I'm a big proponent of orange juice. I love fresh squeezed orange juice. I drink it every single day. It's tons of nutrition in it and tons of healthy sugars, right? And people are like, oh, sugar, it's a horrible word. I'm like, it's not. It's really not. We've demonized sugar, but it's certainly not. Certainly when it's coming with tons of potassium and vitamin C and so many other good properties. Now, does this mean everyone should be consuming tons of orange juice? No, it depends on where your health is and what you've been doing. Of course, but for some people, adding a couple ounces in a few times a day to start letting their body adapt is a good place to start. Yeah. And, and anytime I talk about carbs, I always balance them with protein sources, right? So there's a balancing fact, right? You want to combine these foods together primarily to slow down some of how fast they're going to get into your system, right? Because one thing we do know about like things like juice, because it is very easily digestible, it will get into your system really quickly, right? There's no fiber, doesn't really have to work. Your system doesn't have to work really hard, which can be good if you need fuel. But if you're not able to utilize a lot of fuel at one time, which a lot of people are not because they have a slow metabolism, then you want to give it some either protein or some fat. Both can be utilized to slow down that carbohydrates getting into your system so that it actually produces a longer term effect so that that meal will feel more satiating. You'll be able to utilize those sugars over a longer period of time, right? And you won't put too much strain on the system all at once.
Got it. Right. And so that's getting into like just properly measuring out your macros, right? Is that what that is? And
there's a level. Yes. Right. So we definitely look at somebody's macros to see, right. And it's judged on what their body's doing, right? If you're coming from 1,000 calories and, you only have 50 carbs a day, then, right, giving you 200 carbs a day would not work well for you. Maybe that's what you need to heal, but that's certainly not where we start. We go very slow, right? So this isn't here, do this diet and do that for the next 6 months. It's do this week, and then next week do this, and then next week do this. It's a constant shift of adapting, right? We want your body to slowly and surely adapt so we don't overrun it. Yeah. And so that it can shift.
That's actually really cool. So that really explains why you have like diet plans that are really broken down like that and why you go into these like different phases.
Yeah. And there are, and like I said, depending on what somebody's history is, right? And it's not just, to me, healing and getting your system in a better place is not just concerning their diet, right? The stressors in their life are a big part of how somebody heals. You can't continue to, as I say, run from a lion every single day, right? Live in that really stressed state and just start eating food and think it's all going to be fixed. It usually doesn't work that way. We have to look at all those avenues and go, okay, you working 100 hours a week maybe is not ideal for you, at least right now. Your body's not supporting you. So if you want to get better,
professional like you to like break it down, let's look at your whole life, right? And just start to figure out what's the best plan to go forward, what you got to cut back on. And because I think it's really tough when we get caught up in our lives, we get immune to a certain amount of stress and our specific lifestyles. And we don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I'm sure you help point out a lot of this to people like, hey, it's normal and you shouldn't have to adapt to that
and again, we can all, I'm there trying to build resiliency in people. Like you're going to have stress in your life. We can't just reduce it to zero. My job is to help your body become more resilient so that you can meet that body where it's at. So if you put a certain amount of stress there, I want to pull the body up. Now, if that stress is really keeping you down, then we might have to lower the stress for a time period until we can pull you up into a place that you're better able to handle it, right? So we're always playing this little game of trying to get you up here. And of course, what I find is when people start to feel better, they can handle more, and it's fine, right? I mean, you cannot live a life without stress. We need to be able to handle and adapt to it and be more resilient. But we're living in a world where we're keep putting stuff on our plate, and then we're dieting, especially women, right? And then they're eating less, and then they're going out to the gym, and then they're having
that.
Yeah.
So guilty for that. Like, take on more and intermittent fast.
Exactly.
So no, this is like really, I'm actually like, woo, I might need to like take a look at what my intake, because I am like, definitely, I am under a lot of stress, right? I mean, as like you said, like a lot of us we take on a lot, but this just makes me really appreciate my body so much more. And I want to take really good care of it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what we have to look at. Like, you want your body to get through life, not completely trashed out, right? Look at today's society. We have increases levels of obesity, being overweight. Okay. We've all just been through a pandemic, still in a pandemic. It's totally constricted people's lives. What heart disease is up, cancer is up, everything is up. Yeah. Right. And we have to think, hey, like, do I want to go through those processes, or can I support my body in better health to avoid a lot of those things? Right. Because if the body is optimally running, right, symptoms are just signs of something yet to come, right? Your body's always telling you things. And if digestion is slowing down and you are constipated all the time, your digestive system is the gatekeeper of all energy and nutrition. And if it's not functioning optimally, that should start to be a concern, because your body's not getting what it needs. So it's going to start adapting certain ways. And some of those adaptations can turn into constipation, but then they can turn into tumors or cancer or other diseases that you don't want. And once you go that far, now there's a problem. Now, I don't, can your body really fix, or are you going to have to go through some surgeries or procedures?
This is the perfect segue into our next section, which we want to talk about how metabolism affects your hair, because that's definitely a health marker. Talk to us a little bit about that, because you have a really interesting perspective that I haven't spoken to anybody about.
Well, yeah. And if we look at metabolism as a sum of every metabolic process, right? Your hair is a growing thing. And it's not just there and you have it's constantly growing, right? And so if the hair follicle is getting enough nutrients, then your hair coming out will grow and continue, and it'll be healthy as long as you treat it with good products and so forth, right? Of course, when we have hair, we're also being beaten by the chemicals from the outside, the chemicals in our products, all that can actually affect it. But for it to actually grow properly, it has to have nutrition. It's a growing thing. Now, for most people, not everybody, I mean, I've heard all sorts of stories that people can be severely sick and still have great hair for whatever bizarre reason. But and whatever people's Achilles heel is, or where your stuff starts showing up, could be different for a variety of different reasons. But certainly what I find is that when people start becoming overly stressed or start living in this stressed metabolic rate, hair is one of the first things that starts to go, right? You don't need hair to survive. It's not a huge keeping you alive, right?
So words out of my mouth. I literally say that to everybody. I'm like, you need to understand, you don't need it to survive. Like, take care of it, because it'll be the first thing to go.
Yeah. And so if you don't take care of yourself, you're absolutely right. Hair is like, we don't need to grow. We'll go bad, or we're going to fall out, or that hair follicle doesn't live very long. So you'll get people's hair falling out. It becomes very thin. I mean, all of these things, it becomes very dry. All of these things can be a product of your health. So it is a very good marker on how healthy somebody is. And so again, then we have to come down to, right, we have these living follicles inside of our skin, right? The hair that you see is actually dead cells, right? This is not a live cell, right? It's internally that are alive, and that's the part that's actually growing. And so our hair definitely needs certain nutrients to grow properly. And one of those essentially is fuel. And what is our preferred source of fuel is carbohydrates, right? So we need to make sure we're getting enough energy so that our hair can grow. That is a big part of it. Certainly, then there's other nutrients, right? Some of the very important ones are things like your B vitamins. That's very important. Zinc is very important for hair growth, right? And some people like, especially what I see is in people that are eating like vegan diets. And again, if your diet is working for you, stick with it. But vegan diets are not nearly as bioavailable as a diet that has a lot of animal product. It just isn't. That's just, we know this. There's nothing to argue there. And then the nutrients and the proteins and so forth that are in animal products are just going to be way more bioavailable to you. So getting sources of animal product that have these nutrients in it are going to be more ideal. And two foods that I find help people's hair the most, if they do them consistently outside of consuming enough carbohydrates, are oysters and beef liver, right? Because of how nutrient rich these foods are, right? Everyone's like, good God, I cannot eat beef liver. It's just, and I get it, right? I totally get that.
I grew up eating it. I'm Persian. I can eat beef liver all day.
Then you are good, right?
I'm good. I grew up on a good diet.
Yeah, it definitely, but it is ounce for ounce. It's the most nutritionally dense food on this planet, right? It has tons of vitamin A, it has tons of copper, it has tons of B vitamin, and it's all very bioavailable. And so, one of the things I'll suggest is, having 3 to 4 ounces of beef liver every single week, right? And same thing with oysters, eating oysters every single week. They're super high in zinc. They're the most zinc rich food on this planet, super bioavailable. Plus they have other minerals in there. And again, you will find if someone's consistent with those two foods, plus making sure they get enough fuel and not being in chronic stress, their hair will improve significantly.
All right, everybody, have some more oysters, have some more beef liver. It's not bad. It's not a bad recommendation.
It's not, and when you think about it, it's not horrible, right? I mean, and it really isn't. It's just something to do regularly. I mean, if you have accessibility to oysters in your area, great. If you don't, you can have some decent canned oysters and eat them regularly. But it's just a consistency thing. It's certainly, improving your hair doesn't happen immediately, but by improving your health, that will start to be a product of it.
Yeah. Talk to us about the prolactin hormone.
Right. So prolactin is the hormone that never is being discussed when certainly talking about hair health. It's usually referred to as the lactation hormone because women have elevated prolactin levels when they're lactating. And that's a totally fine thing. However, prolactin is also in men and women. And what we have found is that high prolactin levels when a woman is not lactating lead to hair falling out. So the question is, what is elevating prolactin levels? And the underlying answer is it's stress or other stress mediators, which means other stress hormones like cortisol or adrenaline, estrogen. Excess estrogen can raise prolactin, and even serotonin, which most people don't refer to as a stress hormone, although it is a stress hormone, can also raise prolactin. So those hormones in itself, when they're all adaptive hormones, meaning they all work in the stressed metabolism, right? They're good for us. They keep us alive. But in the chronic state, you don't want them elevated. And so again, because prolactin it's an adaptive hormone. It's essentially elevating to say, hey, we're going to elevate because we don't have enough energy and fuel. So that hair thing you got going on, we don't need it, right? You got more important functions that we need to do, like think or breathe, or you're running all the time. Maybe that's what you're doing, right? And so, and a lot of it happens too with, you have tons of men, but men see that men will have elevated levels of prolactin in their body. And right, what do you see with men? Male pattern baldness, all of these things. So that's one thing that they can look at. And so, of course,
if somebody gets like their blood work done and they can take a look at their prolactin levels also.
Yeah. If you can get your doctor to do it, it seems to be a fight because again, your medical doctor is just going to relate it to lactation and so forth. So they have a hard time, but if you can come in with some studies, which there's plenty out there linking it to hair falling out, then they might, especially if you're having hair loss, be something to check. It is a biomarker to check.
You got to be your own like advocate. You have to go in knowing what you're looking for. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of great like medical professionals out there. And like you said, there are some that will overlook these things. So if you are having difficulties, you are wondering what is happening exactly in your body, you feel like you're having these hormonal changes, like here you go. Here's what you need to look at and focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in today's world, it is, and this is why I love this approach. And like I said, when I found it like 10, 11 years ago, I mean, I was someone in the industry and I would shift my diet plan every 6 months based on, again, my physique and so forth. But when I found this, it was like everything finally was like, oh, that's why that never worked. Or that's why that, and it helped me to actually stay on a path that was far more supportive to my health. And I would make decisions, right? I wasn't going to get up at 5 a.m. if I had a 5-hour flight and traveled all day to go work out, because I'm like, well, that's dumb. That's just going to stress me out even more. I would make decisions based on supporting myself, and what this happens is when you start supporting yourself physiologically, nutritionally, it opens up a can of worms, because now you're not spending so much time worried about this, getting this lean weight or focusing on the calorie restriction and so forth. No. And of course, it opens up the doors to kind of heal other things in your life. Right. And this is what we'll normally see. It's kind of like now you have a foundation of nutrition and energy that now you can actually look at all of these things. And it's, to me, very life-changing, because it just creates this different dynamic and way of seeing the world and yourself, so that you can kind of show up being supported versus just starved. And right. Because when we're in that place, we are not going to be our best self.
You have your book out, How to Heal Your Metabolism. And I haven't read it yet, but I will. Absolutely. 1000%. Who is it for? Tell us who is your ideal reader, who should be picking up your book, and why.
So the ideal reader, I mean, it's quite honestly that anybody that feels they've been ever struggling with their metabolism or their health. I mean, anybody, man or woman, can benefit from it. It's definitely going to make you look at health and nutrition from a different lens. A lot of people will relate to it and go, yeah, that was me. I used to do every single diet and so forth. And why are these things happening to me? And so it just gives you a more of a, without being too technical, it's what I didn't want to make it too technical, but it's kind of more easy to digest so that you can understand your body, what to look for, what you should be measuring, what is actual health, right? So I try to give you a definition so you can have an understanding of it, and why certain foods will be more supportive versus other foods.
And is somebody able to like really get some valuable information that they can apply to themselves?
100%.
From a book, right?
100%. It's going to give them a good amount of knowledge for sure, right? So it's going to at least give them a foundation. Is it going to make them know everything? No. I mean, there's a lot of different kind of components to it and a lot of different ways to look at it, but it will give you at least a generalized understanding. And if you're certainly interested in more, right? I mean, you can certainly follow me on Instagram or Facebook under Cake Daring Fitness. And I talk about it every day and little blippets, right? Because I find people do best with little blippets of information. And so, and then you can digest and apply.
Yeah. Your account is really full of such amazing information, no doubt. Kate, tell me real quickly, what is one thing that you've changed in your life, knowing everything that you know now, that you will never go back on? I'd love to close with this and leave everybody with a good inspirational story on why you want to look at your health from a different lens, and why you want to try to, take action and switch things up maybe.
So I would say, because I am a little bit of a type A. I have always pushed my entire life. Like I was like, you don't tell me I can't do it. I'll just push and push and push. And it was just kind of how I saw life, even though a lot of when I was pushing was doing harm to me. And that could be as far as restrictive eating or just excessive exercising that I did. And I know I will never go back to any of that, right? I'm never going to deprive myself of certain foods. I'm never going to deprive myself of getting enough fuel. And I'm never going to push myself into a place where I don't feel good. And so there's a lot of self-love, I think, that comes through this, because, you've got to step back and go, why am I doing all these things to myself? What is the purpose, right? So is having this perfect physique or whatever, is that what life is all about? And what consequences are coming with that? And so, it definitely shifted me completely to just a different place of like, I'm not going to beat myself up anymore. Right. And it's going to come from a place of support and what is best for me overall versus, what is going to punish me so I can get to this whatever look or whatever. I just don't take that approach anymore.
I love that. That's so healthy. That's such a good, strong message, because, personally, I am pretty regimented and I like to be regimented. But I do find I stop myself sometimes and ask, like, hang on, this actually does make me happy, right? Like, I actually do enjoy this type of routine. And how do I feel today versus when I started doing this? I think it's so important to check in with yourself and make sure that, like you said, you're doing it all for the right reasons. And I love that. Thank you for that message. I think that that's such a healthy place more people could learn to kind of the respect that they could learn to treat themselves with, instead of just doing it for all the wrong reasons and focusing on, like you said, diet, kill yourself, exercise as much as you can. But it's like, let's look at the big picture. There's so much more we should be focusing on before that.
Yep, 100%.
It's excellent. Kate, you are incredible. Thank you so much. I absolutely loved learning about your perspective, and I'm sure everyone else is really going to enjoy this. You are so awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing everything. This was invaluable information, and I love what you're doing. And I think we need more people like you that are bringing on such a healthy message to share with the world. And yeah, I really enjoyed our talk. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.